Okay, we're gonna do a little pantry tour based on the gardens that we grew this year and all of the food that came out of it. And so most of it has ended up here in this pantry. As you'll see, we're not in a specific room. We're actually just in our living room here. We rent this house. And so I just want to show you that it can be really simple to have a pantry in your house. So I'm just going to show you a few different things about what's on here. We have some canned jams. I'm not a really big canner. I don't do it a lot, although this year I've done it way more than normal in terms of how much stuff we've put away in terms of jam and mostly tomato sauce here. So a lot of passata is just tomatoes cooked down and put into the can, and then a water bath canning method. So I'm not going to get into the specifics of how to can. There's so much information on the internet out there. So right now it's just a tour. So up here you'll see that we have lots of dried fruit and veg. So these are dried tomatoes. We did so many of these this year. We grew a lot of Roma tomatoes. They came on so quickly at the end of the year. And yeah, we did lots of dried passata, as well as I made lots of ketchup, green and red tomato ketchup. The other thing that we have done a lot of is dried fruit. So these are apples. These ones just have the peels still on them, just sliced really quickly and put in the dehydrator and then put into these jars. So I find a lot of these jars secondhand. You don't need to buy new. I would say that's a misconception where you have to buy all the high-tech fancy lids and all of those things. You can find a lot of this stuff secondhand or even in people's recycling or your own recycling. Look for, if you buy in bulk, you can get big jars, big pickle jars, and use those for your dried food. Here you will see our Traumasino squash, and so we have them kind of scattered around our house right now. These are curing still, so once they get this nice kind of darker color here, that means they're ready to roast and to eat. And so we'll be eating these all throughout the winter, and we've given a lot away and shared in the bounty of the Traumasinos this year. Okay, so I'll show you in terms of making medicine. So fire cider, you can find lots of recipes online. I didn't really follow a recipe for this one. I just used what we had in the garden. So we grew a ton of chilies this year. They're called a Tibetan Lhasa chili. And they're really, really nice, sweet, but also super fiery. So there's lots of those in there. Rosemary, our own garlic and onions, and horseradish is in there, as well as our lemons. So we have lemons growing in the greenhouse right now. So all of that is in here with our homemade apple cider. So apple cider vinegar. So with our apple cider vinegar, I have a jar here to show you. So this is it's called apple scrap vinegar. It's the peels and the cores of the apples where I was making sauce, and I just saved the peels and the cores, and I put this in water with a little bit of sugar and a little bit of other living apple cider, and so that will convert all of the water in here into vinegar, and it just sits there for a couple months and gets really yummy. More medicine to have over the winter is alcohol. So we made some mead this year. This is with Angelica. It's another herbaceous plant that we have growing in our garden, and it's also really good for you. It was a traditional plant used in healing during the time of the bubonic plague, and so yeah, I cut it up, put it in a jar similar to the apple cider vinegar. I put water on there and put honey in it as well, and let it sit for a few months, and then bottled it up. So these are the salted plums, and so these are green plums that I picked at a friend's farm in the springtime. So they hadn't turned, they were still rock hard, and the tree was just loaded, so it wasn't a big deal for me to take some of them. And yeah, and then you put them in water with salt and leave it for several months, and they turn pickled. They still have that kind of plum, umeboshi kind of flavor to them, which is a Japanese type of pickling with a specific type of plum. So here we've just used the wild green plums. Yeah, and you leave them for a while, and they kind of take a texture that's similar to an olive. So, if you're eating a charcuterie board, they would be on there as kind of an olive supplement. And this is also something that you can do when you're thinning your fruit on a fruit tree. If you notice in the early spring when the fruit set starts and it's just loaded and there's more fruit maybe than the tree can actually hold, sometimes branches will break. And so thinning the fruit is something that we will do. And in that time, you can use that thin fruit to make these. So this is vinegar from the last year's wild plum ferment, and they were a red plum, and here you can see the beautiful red color. And so this is just the vinegar of that fermented process. So I bottled it up, and we'll use that on salads and different things. So here is some green salsa. I've used tomatillos and green tomatoes and some of our peach hot peppers and other things in here, garlic too. And so I chopped them all up, put them in here, added some salt, and all the brine is actually just from the food itself, as the salt kind of takes all the moisture out. And I packed it in this jar here. And I like to mark like what's in it and the date. And then if there's any special thing going on with the moon, I sometimes put that on there as well. Just gives it some extra magic. This is my first year growing a lot of hot peppers from seed. And so you start your pepper seed at the end of February, very early March, and you'll have a really long pepper season if you do that here on the coast. I grew them outside as well as in the greenhouse, and they were just super prolific. There's still plants out there right now in November with chilies on them. And so I was trying to figure out like what to do with them all, because we have a little kid who doesn't like spicy food that much. It's not something that I cook with a lot, although I really like them and I see that they have value in terms of keeping you healthy. And so I've done a bunch of different things, mostly with fermenting and drying. There's this big, I'll show you this big jar up here of dried chilies. So they're whole dried and they're looking really beautiful. So those you can make all kinds of chili sauce and chili pepper and all of that. And then the other thing I made that I'm really excited about is this Singapore red chili sauce. And it's kind of like a chutney where it has raisins in it and vinegar and sugar and those things. So we only make a small amount of that, but it's delicious. So we grew some giant sunflowers this year, Titan sunflower. They got massive and they had such beautiful seeds in them. So we've saved and dried the seeds. And my plan is that we're going to sprout them. So that's kind of what I'm hoping for in terms of their biggest yield in terms of a seed, other than I've saved some specifically to replant next year. But I think that, these will be in our window in a couple months when we're craving nice fresh greens, and we'll grow sunflower shoots. So the other seed that we saved quite a bit of are the beans, and we grew lots of beans this year, and there's all different kinds. I haven't separated them out to sort them, but I like them like this. They look beautiful, and if we're gonna be making, chili or soup, I'll just take a scoop of this because they're all cooking beans, and yeah, we'll cook them up, eat them. So if you don't have a big, garden, but you still want to create a pantry like this, it's totally possible. It's just that you will need to buy the produce yourself and go through that process of, preserving the harvest. And so in this case, we got a bunch of blueberries. We did a bulk order of blueberries in July and got them, and I made blueberry jam, and then I dehydrate a bunch of blueberries as well. And so these you can put in oatmeal, and they last a really long time. Dehydrated food is, it preserves a lot of the nutrients, and it's, no refrigeration, really accessible. So we did make quite a bit of fruit leather as well, although that seems to be the one thing that's disappearing. Our 5-year-old loves fruit leather and can't really make it quick enough. So yeah, it's dwindling. I need to make some more with the last of our apples. Yeah, and I just want to say that, you can dehydrate. Most of the dehydration that we have done is, we use a Nesco dehydrator, plug-in kind of electric dehydrator, although we do have a solar dehydrator as well. It just, where we are near the ocean, it doesn't get hot enough to dehydrate that food, especially just in terms of our climate and all of that. So we rely on our electric dehydrator, and you can get fruit leather, attachments kind of for your dehydrator. There's so many books out there, my goodness. Every day there's more and more books on fermenting food and preserving food. There's more books than time in a day to read, but two that I really like. This one is old school. I think it's from the 70s. It's called Dry It, You'll Like It. It actually has some specs of how to make your own solar dehydrator in it, and it has some really great tips on dehydrating food. And then this one also I really like. I just picked it up this year, and it talks about preserving food without freezing or canning, which I think is, is the lowest tech. If you can just use the sun or preserve food traditionally without those modern technologies.